So we're going to give some step-by-step instructions of how to read a question and figure out what the question is asking us and then solve the question. So our first step is going to be looking at what the question is actually asking. Well, in this one, it's asking us regarding what the area of a triangle, which is given by the formula A equals half base times height. It's given us some information. It's telling us that the area is going to be 48 centimeters squared and the triangle is 8 centimeters tall. What it's asking us is to find the length of the triangle. Our first step is going to rewrite the whole question into something that we can work with easily. So the most important piece of information is going to be our formula, which is going to be A equals half base times height. Now, if we look at the information that's given to us in the question, we know that the area is equal to 48 centimeters squared. And that's going to be equal to A. We know that the height is going to equal 8 centimeters because we're told how tall the triangle is. So that's going to be equal to our H. What we don't know, and what we're being asked to find, is the length of the triangle, which is going to be equal to B, which we don't know yet. Our next step is to put all of our information that we know into our original equation. So we know that A equals 48, the half still stays, the B stays, and the height is 8 centimeters. So we've put all of that information in. Now we simplify the equation. So the 48, that stays the same. What's half of 8? Well, that's 4. So it becomes 4b. Now what we're going to do is just flip the equation over. So the right-hand side moves over to the left and the left-hand side moves over to the right. So we'll get 4b equals 48. Our next step would be to move the 4 over to the other side, which, seeing its timesing on the left-hand side, will become dividing on the right-hand side. So b equals 48 divided by 4, which is going to equal 12. Now we've got to remember that the question has been dealing everything in centimeters, so the length of the triangle is going to equal 12 centimeters. And that's what the question has asked us. So let's move on to it and do another question. So this is our second question. Let's see what it's asking us. Well, what's it saying? Is it saying to use the formula A equals P outside of 1 plus R over 100, all of that to the power of n. So what it's asking us to do in this question, though, is just put different values into that formula to find out what the unknown is. Luckily for us, the first one we're looking at has got all of that information written down. So what we're trying to do is find P when we know that A equals 4500, R equals 8, and N equals 6. So our first step will be to put all of this into the equation. So the equation being A equals P outside of 1 plus R over 100 to the power of n. So let's just put in our values that we've got now. We know that A equals 4500, which is going to equal P, what we want to know, outside of 1 plus R is going to be equal to 8 over 100. And that's all to the power of 6. So what's our next step? Well, in this situation, we need to simplify what's in the brackets. So 4500 is equal to P, and 8 over 100 is 0.8 as a decimal. So we can convert this into 1.08 to the power of 6. So what do we need to do now? Well, we need to move the 1.08 to the power of 6 over to the other side so that we have P all by itself. So rewriting that will give us P is equal to 4,500 over 1.08 to the power of 6. Which, I don't know about you, but I certainly couldn't do that in my head. So I put it into the calculator and we find that P is equal to 2835.763, and it goes on and on and on. So we'll just round that to 2 decimal places, and that's going to give us 2,835.76. So that's our answer for the first part. Now let's look at the second part. In this one, we look at the information. What it's wanting us to find is R, and we've been given A, P, and N. So let's just put that straight into the equation. So our first step is just going to be getting down an equation. So A equals P outside of 1 plus R over 100 to the power of N. So now we just put in the values of the ones that we know. So we know that A equals 8,650. P is going to be equal to 6,500. 1 plus R over 100 to the power of 4. Rearranging this is going to be a little bit more complicated. Because R is inside the brackets and it's also to the power of 4, we need to do some quadratic rooting. Take the 4th root of it to find the answer. Our first step, though, will be to move the 6,500 over. So that's multiplied there, so we divide on the other side. So 8,650 over 6,500 is equal to 1 plus R over 100 to the power of 4. Now, when we need to move the power of 4 over, we need to take the 4th root of it. So the 4th root of 8,650 over 6,500 is equal to 1 plus R over 100. Right, so now we're getting closer to what R is. Our next step would be to move the 1 over. So that is going to be a minus as it's moving over to the other side. So it would be the 4th root of 8,650 over 6,500 minus 1. The 1 is outside of the 4th root is equal to R over 100. Our next step is to move the division of 100 over onto the other side, which becomes a multiplication. I'll rewrite it this time so that R is on the left-hand side. So R is going to be equal to 100. Now, because it's multiplication, I'm putting it in brackets. So it's going to be the 4th root of 8,650 over 6,500. Again, outside of that root is a minus 1. And that becomes our answer for R. So again, this is not going to be a very nice number, but it equals approximately 7.405 ... and it continues going on, but to 2 decimal places, this is going to be equal to 7.41. So now let's look at another question. So the third question is going to be, the volume of the sphere is given by the formula below. Find the radius of a sphere with a volume of 512 centimeters cubed. Well, our volume of the sphere, the formula, is going to be down here. What the question is asking us is to find the radius of a sphere with a volume of 512. So, our first step, well, we've got our formula over there, so our first step will be what we know. So we know that our volume is going to equal 512. We don't know anything else from this, but we can start working it out from here. So, let's write it down in our equation. So, V equals 4 over 3 pi r cubed. We know what V equals, so we know that 512 is going to equal 4 over 3 pi r cubed. So our first step, well, that's going to be to move the 3 over to the other side, which is going to give us, it's a divide on one side, so it's going to become a times on the other. So 3 times 512 is equal to 4 pi r cubed. Now we're going to move the 3, the 4, and the pi over to the other side. It's times in this situation, so we need to make it a divide. So it's going to be 3 times 512 divided by 4 pi equals r cubed. Now we need to move the cubed over onto the other side. The opposite of a cube is taking the cubed root. So the cubed root of everything over on the other side, which is 3 times 512 over 4 pi, is going to give us our r. Now, again, I can't do that one in my head, so I will plug it into a calculator, which will give us r is equal to 4.9628, and it just continues on. So I'm going to round that to 2 decimal places of 4.96. Now, our unit for this one is going to be centimetres. So that is the radius to 2 decimal places of our sphere with a volume of 512 centimetres cubed.